Lesson 8.6 is on solving quadratic functions by factoring. In this lesson, our objective is to solve quadratic equations by factoring. So in the last lesson, we looked at graphing. This time we will factor in order to determine our solutions. And remember, quadratic functions or equations can have one solution, two solutions, or no solutions. So here, we already graphed. Another method to use to solve quadratic functions is to factor and use the zero product property. So for all real numbers a and b, if the product of two quantities equals 0, at least one of the quantities equals 0. So that means if I have 3 times 0 equals 0, 0 times 4, 0. So if a times b equals 0, either a has to be 0 or b has to be 0 in order for that product to be 0. So when I factor, one of those factors or both of those factors could be equal to 0, and that's going to give us our solutions. So we're going to start by looking at example 1. We're going to use the zero product property to solve each equation. So these ones are already factored for us. So for a, we have x minus 3 times the quantity x plus 7 equals 0. So this means we could have x minus 3 equal to 0, because one of these has to be equal to 0 in order for the product to be 0. So x minus 3 could be equal to 0, or x plus 7 could be equal to 0. And these are just one-step equations that we can solve to get the value of x. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So x equals 3. And over here I would subtract 7 from both sides. So x equals negative 7. So here the solutions are 3 and negative 7. So the solutions are 3 and negative 7. B, we have x times x minus 5. So x could equal 0, or this x minus 5 could equal 0. This guy, I don't need to solve. X is already isolated. It's by itself. It equals 0. Here, I have to add 5 to both sides to get x by itself. So x equals 5. So in this case, the solutions are 0 and 5. Okay, so that is how you would solve those. This is if it's already factored. So now there are 2 check it out problems for you to do. So go ahead, take a moment, pause the video, and then resume when you're ready to check your answer. So for A, I have x times x plus 4. So I'm going to set x equal to 0 and x plus 4 equal to 0. X equals 0 is already solved. So I just have to subtract 4 in this other equation to get x equals negative 4. So here, the solutions are 0 and negative 4. B, I have x plus 4 times the quantity x minus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to set both of these equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. For this one, the opposite of adding 4 is subtract 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides to get x equals negative 4. X minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to add 3 to both sides to get x equals 3. So here, the solutions are negative 4 and 3. So now we're going to go ahead and look at example 2. If a quadratic equation is written in standard form, so that's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, you may need to factor before using the zero property to solve the equation. So in example 2, we have to factor first. Then we'll be able to set each factor equal to 0 to solve for the solutions. Some of these you'll have to rewrite in standard form first. So make sure it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c first before you try to factor. So for a, I have x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0. Here, x squared has a coefficient of 1, so I need to look at factors of 10 that are going to add together to give me 7. So I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. So I'm going to have x, and these are both positive, so it's going to be x plus times x plus, and it equals 0. So factors of 10, 1 and 10, that gives me 11. 2 and 5, 2 and 5 does give me 7, so it's going to be x plus 2 and x plus 5. You could also write the 5 first and the 2 second, totally up to you, but it means the same thing. So now that I have this factored, I'm going to go ahead and set both my factors equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 2 from both sides for this one to get x equals negative 2. Subtract 5 from both sides to get x equals negative 5. So the solutions are negative 2 and negative 5. For B, I have x squared plus 2x equals 8. This is not in standard form. I need to get 8 to the other side, so I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. So I get x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. So I need a factor. So I have x squared, and this is a negative 8. My c is negative, so I'm going to have x plus and then x minus equals 0, because a positive times a negative is going to give me that negative. So I need factors of negative 8 that are going to add together to give me 2. So 1 and 8 wouldn't work, and then I would have 2 and 4. The 4 would have to be positive, and the 2 would have to be negative. So x plus 4 times x minus 2. So 4 times negative 2 gives me negative 8, and then 4 plus negative 2 gives me this 2 for my B. So now I'm going to go ahead and set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. For the x plus 4, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides to get x equals negative 4. The x minus 2, I have to add 2 to both sides to get x equals 2. So the solutions are negative 4 and 2. So that is how you would solve those two. So now we're going to go ahead and look at C. For C, I have x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. And here, everything's positive. It's already in standard form. So this is x squared, so I'm going to write this as x plus equals 0. So I need factors of 1. Well, the only factors of 1 are 1 in itself, so 1 times 1. And 1 plus 1 does give me 2. So x plus 1 times x plus 1. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1 from both sides to get x equals negative 1. Subtract 1 from both sides to get x equals negative 1. So here, these are the same solution. X equals negative 1. So in this case, I'm only going to have one solution. So one solution. So the solution is negative 1. So sometimes that might happen. You might have just one solution. Because again, you can have 2, you can have 1, and you can also have none. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the D. We have negative 2x squared equals 18 minus 12x. So here, this is not in standard form. So let's get everything to the left-hand side. So I'm going to add 12x to both sides. So we're going to get negative 2x squared plus 12x equals 18. And then to get the 18 over, I'm going to subtract 18 from both sides. So I get negative 2x squared plus 12x minus 18 equals 0. And now I'm going to start factoring. But before I factor, there is a GCF between all my terms. I can pull out a negative 2. So I'm going to pull out that GCF, so negative 2. So negative 2 times what gives me negative 2x squared? That's going to be x squared. And then negative 2 times what gives me 12x? Well, I'm going to need a negative because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then 6, because negative 2 times negative 6 will give me that positive 12. And then x. And then negative 2 times what gives me negative 18? A negative times a positive this time will give me that negative. And then 2 times 9 gives me that 18. So we have negative 2 times the quantity x squared minus 6x plus 9. And this equals 0. So now I'm going to factor what's in here. So I'm still going to have this negative 2. I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. And it equals 0. So x squared will break down to x and x. My last term is positive, but my middle term is negative. So I'm going to have a negative times a negative to get that positive, and then a negative plus a negative to get the negative middle term. Factors in 9, 1 and 9 doesn't add together to give me negative 6. And then 3 and 3 would add to give me 6. So negative 3 times negative 3 gives me positive 9, but negative 3 plus negative 3 gives me this negative 6. So the factored form is negative 2 times the quantity x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 3 equals 0. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So here, this GCF that we pulled out, that's not going to help us at all. We only look at the factored form inside the parentheses. So I'm going to set x minus 3 equal to 0, x minus 3 equal to 0. And the reason why we're not concerned with this negative 2 is because negative 2 can never equal 0. Therefore, it's not going to get the product of these three terms to equal 0. So the only thing that can get 0 is going to be these parentheses. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So we get x equals 3. Add 3 again to get x equals 3. So in this case, again, these are the same solution. So that means we are going to have one solution. So the solution is 3. So now there are 4 check it out problems for you to do. So solve each quadratic equation by factoring. So go ahead, take a moment, pause the video, and then resume when you are ready to check your answer. So for A, I have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. This factors to x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. And here, x minus 3 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, so we get x equals 3. Add 3 to both sides, so we get x equals 3. So the solution is 3. There's only one solution there. For B, you have to start by writing this in standard form, so subtract 5 from both sides. So we get x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. And then I need to factor, so I'm going to set up my parentheses. X squared is going to be x times x. And then my last term is negative, so I'm going to need a negative and a positive. And I need to think of factors of 5 that would add together to give me 4. So I'm going to have a negative 1 and a positive 5. Negative 1 times 5 gives me negative 5. And then negative 1 plus 5 gives me a positive 4. So I'm going to have x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides, so x equals 1. Subtract 5 from both sides, so x equals negative 5. So the solutions, this time I have 2, so the solutions are 1 and negative 5. 2C, I have 30x equals negative 9x squared minus 25. So here, to write this in standard form, I'm just going to subtract this 30x from both sides. So I get 0 equals negative 9x squared, and then I'll have this negative 30x comes next, minus 25. Okay, so the 0 is just on the left-hand side. It still means the same thing as being on the right. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and factor. So looking here, all my terms are negative. So I'm actually going to factor out a negative 1 to start. So I'm going to have 0 equals negative 1. And then I'm going to have 9x squared plus 30x plus 25. And pulling out that negative will make this easier to factor. Now, you might not have a negative if you decided to add the 9x squared and add the 25 to the other side. So that's something to keep in mind. All your terms would be positive already. So I have 0 equals negative 1. I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. So everything's positive, so I'm going to have addition here. So 9x squared, I have to think of factors of 9 and then factors of 25. And then those are going to have to add together to give me 30. So in this case, it's going to be 3x plus 5 and 3x plus 5. Okay, so my last term, 5 times 5, gives me 25. First, 3x times 3x, 9x squared. And then I have 3x times 5, which is 15x. 5 times 3x, 15x. 15x plus 15x gives me that 30x. So that's just a quick check to make sure you factored it correctly. So now these guys are the same, so I'm going to set it equal to 0. So 3x plus 5 equals 0. So subtract 5 from both sides to get 3x by itself. So we have 3x equals negative 5. And then from here, divide by 3. So x equals negative 5 over 3. So here, there's one solution. The solution is negative 5 over 3. Okay. D, I have 3x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. Already in standard form, so I can set up my parentheses. So 3x squared. The only factors of 3 are 1 and 3, so I'm going to have 3x and 1x. Last term is positive, but middle is negative, so I'm going to have a negative in both of them, because a negative times a negative is a positive, but when you add two negatives together, you get a negative. So, factors of 1, the only factors of 1 are 1 and 1. So let's just check to make sure this works. 3x times x, 3x squared. Negative 1 times negative 1 gives us that 1, the positive 1. And then 3x times negative 1, negative 3x. Negative 1 times x, negative 1x. And negative 3x plus negative 1x gives us a negative 4x. So I have two factors here. I'm going to set equal to 0. So 3x minus 1 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. For this one, I'm going to add 1 to both sides to start. So I get 3x equals 1. Divide by 3 to get x equals 1/3. For my second equation, x minus 1, I'm going to add 1 to both sides to get x equals 1. So this time I have two solutions, I apologize. So the solutions are 1/3 and 1. Okay, so I have two solutions. So now we're going to go ahead and look at example 3. Okay, we have a sports application. So it says the height of a diver above the water during a dive can be modeled by h equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 48, where h is the height in feet and t is time in seconds. Find the time it takes for the diver to reach the water. So we're going to use this equation, set it equal to 0, and then factor it. So between negative 16, 8, and 48, there's a common factor of negative 8, so we're going to pull that out. And what's left on the inside is 2t squared minus t minus 6. And with this guy, I'm going to factor. 2t squared breaks down to 2t and t. The only factors of 2 are 2 and 1. And then we have a negative 6 for our c and a negative middle term. So I'm going to need a positive and a negative. You're going to have to play around to see which one goes where. But then I'm going to have 3 and negative 2. So the factored form is negative 8 times the quantity 2t plus 3 times the quantity t minus 2. So then I'm going to set the 2t plus 3 equal to 0. So subtract 3 from both sides to get 2t equals negative 3, and then divide by 2. So you get t equals negative 3 over 2. Then I have t minus 2. I'll set that equal to 0. Add 2 to both sides to get t equals 2. Now we're talking in time, so we can't have negative time. So this negative 3 over 2 would not make sense in this real world situation. T equals 2 makes sense. So it's going to be 2 seconds. So it takes the diver 2 seconds to reach the water. Now if this was not a real world situation, we would have 2 solutions. But since this is a real world application, only the positive value will make sense. So now there's a check it out problem. Number 3, it says the equation for the height above the water for another diver can be modeled by h equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 24. Find the time it takes this diver to reach the water. So go ahead, take a moment, pause the video, and then resume when you're ready to check your answer. So we have h equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 24. So I'm going to set this equal to 0, but then I'm also going to pull out my GCF right away. So negative 16, 8, and 24 have a GCF of negative 8. So then negative 8 times 2t squared plus negative 8 times, apologize, that's going to be subtraction, so let me change that. So minus t, we pulled out negative 8, and then negative 8 times negative 3. So we have negative 8 times the quantity 2t squared minus t minus 3. So I'm going to have 0 equals negative 8. I'm going to set up my 2 sets of parentheses. 2t squared will break down to 2t and t. And then I have a negative 3, so one will be positive, one will be negative. So I need to think of factors of 3. So it's going to be 1 and 3. So if I put positive 1 and negative 3, that wouldn't work. How about negative 3 and positive 1? So negative 3 times 1 gives me that negative 3. 2t times t gives me 2t squared. 2t times 1, 2t, and then negative 3 times t is negative 3t. Negative 3t plus this 2t gives me the negative t. So that is the factored form. So now I'm going to set both of those factors equal to 0. So I have 2t minus 3 equals 0, and then t plus 1 equals 0. So for this one, I'm going to add 3 to both sides first. So I get 2t equals 3, divide by 2, to get t equals 3 over 2, which equals 1.5, or 1.5 if you want to leave it in fraction form. So then I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides here. So t equals negative 1. Okay, so this guy, time can't be negative. So this guy is not going to be the solution. So our solution is going to be this t equals 1.5 seconds. So our answer is 1.5